just want to make a note that there are confessions available before Mass, but I'm thinking that's kind of early, so I might offer also confessions at another time, maybe perhaps on Saturday mornings and things like that. It's not necessarily pleasant to go to confession, but I can guarantee it will be an absolutionally good time. Mother Teresa. Can never go wrong telling a story about Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa of Calcutta is an eloquent example of someone who expresses their faith with love and through action and how she lived her life. And it wasn't just through what she said. And the ironic thing is that critics accused her of proselytizing or forcing those people who are suffering or dying to be converted to Catholicism. And we acknowledge it's very true that there were conversions that took place, people becoming Catholic among those that she ministered to, but it didn't happen because they were forced to. Rather, they are won over to Christ by the sincerity and the genuine care that the sisters are giving. And the sisters claim to believe just what we believe, that every human being, no matter how small, how weak, is created in the image of God and beloved by Him. And they demonstrated this faith through their actions. Mother Teresa's first clinic was actually a former Hindu pilgrimage residence, and she turned it into a makeshift hospital for those who were dying. And the local Hindu leaders weren't too happy about this former Hindu pilgrimage site being used as a place for Catholics, especially if they were trying to convert the Hindus. And they suspected that the sisters were engaging in secret baptisms, both of the Hindus and of the Muslims in the facility. In fact, there's gangs that would be hostile towards the sisters. They would harass the sisters who were going around the town looking for the people who were dying or crippled. And the neighbors would throw sticks or stones or dirt at them, and yet they were carrying away the most wretched of the society there. And finally, after a lot of commotion, the police commissioner was called in to close down the place. And Mother Teresa invited him in, and he entered in and looked around, and he saw the floor covered with sick people and the sisters caring for them. He didn't see them preaching at them, but he simply saw them cleaning their wounds, bandaging them up, taking care of them. And he saw them communicating their faith, not through force, but simply through self-giving love. And so the commissioner, being a little bit stunned, went back outside and he said, and he told this angry crowd that was waiting there, that he told them he would stop Mother Teresa only when they persuaded their wives and sisters to take over the work that the nuns had started. And that ended that dispute. Now in the gospel today, we hear Peter saying that Jesus is the Christ. The Christ means the anointed one, the Messiah. Anointed one can also mean someone who is a king or a priest or a prophet. And Jesus is all three. And this is commonly the focus and the reflection of today's gospel. But we don't want to forget what happens immediately after that. Jesus talks about suffering, dying. He switches gears completely. And so, switching gears here, how many advertisements do you think we see in a typical day? A bazillion? Maybe not quite that many. But we see a lot. And what is the message behind pretty much all the advertising? In some form or another, each of them is telling us that we can have more happiness or less inconvenience, and that's what the particular product is going to provide for us. In other words, our consumer culture is convincing us that lasting joy comes from diminishing crosses. And God has shown us that the true lasting joy, the Christian joy, includes the cross. Peter didn't get that. He didn't get it in the gospel. And we too miss it often in our lives. So how can we counteract this bombardment with the culture that tells us to minimize our crosses, to find whatever it is that minimizes our inconvenience? Now, the ancient church did have, and will always have, this wonderful antidote. The Stations of the Cross. There are 14 nice stations around the church here, and they're wonderfully designed, symbolically representative of those actions that took place. Jesus is condemned by Pilate right here. You look at it, and it's a little bit of an abstract art, but it's very beautiful and sends us a message. And we think of the Stations of the Cross, we think, let's pray those on Friday for Lent, and then be done with them. But the church actually encourages us to pray them more regularly, more often. Every Catholic place of worship is called to have them, to have Stations of the Cross. They can be as simple as 14 crosses on the wall, or as elaborate as big three-dimensional plaster statues hanging on the wall. But Catholics are always encouraged to pray the Stations, especially on Fridays, because each Friday is a little bitty Good Friday, and every Sunday is a new Easter. And so it helps us. It reminds us of the suffering that Jesus was talking about in today's gospel, and that's what comes with the cross. And now I know some people who actually do pray the Stations of the Cross every day. It's a devotional. It's flexible. I've heard of the Express 14 Stations of the Cross. We did that when we were in Peru one time. Father Joe Hirsch was like, come on, let's go. And so the other priest took 3 guys around and did Glory be, Glory be, Glory be 14 times around the Station of the Cross. Did the Station of the Cross in about 75 seconds. And I don't recommend doing that, but he wanted to pray the Stations of the Cross at the garden of St. Rose of Lima. And he was able to, in some way, pray briefly at each station. But they are wonderful for meditation. And often there are books out there on how to pray the Stations of the Cross. Little reflections that help us in our daily journey. Help us to know what it is perhaps that we are unaware of that might be separating us from God. And it is a great devotion to training ourselves to remember always that God, in His eternal wisdom, has linked the joy of eternal salvation with the suffering of the cross. So we have the suffering of the cross and the joy of salvation. It's kind of like faith and works. Some people will say works, some people will say faith. It's both. It's a Catholic thing. It's both. You can't have suffering and the cross without salvation. You can't have salvation and suffering without the cross. It's both. And so we always need to remember both and, keeping them together in that tension. And today we celebrate heaven and earth both coming together here at the altar in this Eucharist. Christ coming down to us on the altar, transforming bread and wine into His own body and blood. And it is for that reason we celebrate this Mass. So we thank Mother Teresa for giving us her example, for her life, her sacrifice, her yes through prayer, her yes through her actions. She prayed each morning for 2 hours and then went out and did God's work. She was praying through faith and working through faith and living the life that we are all called to live. A life that is incredible, a life that is inspired, a life that is uncommon, a life that is Christ present in us.